My name is Daniel, a hobbyist who collects antiques from flea markets scattered throughout the suburbs. On a gloomy Sunday morning, I stopped by a flea market near the old quarter, which was rumored to have been a demolished cemetery. The market was not crowded, only a few vendors spread out their tarps on the sidewalk, surrounded by dust and the musty smell of time. A small stall caught my attention. On the old, faded cloth were all sorts of strange objects: rusty pocket watches, ivory, combs, and especially a porcelain doll with big, round blue eyes. It had curly reddish-brown hair and a tattered lace dress, with cracks extending from the corners of its mouth to its temples like an unhealed scar. Despite its age, its eyes seemed to pierce through me, deep and cold. I bent down to pick it up, the dust peeling off to reveal pale porcelain skin underneath. I don't know why I felt drawn to it. The seller was a wrinkled old woman, wearing a torn conical hat, her voice hoarse like the wind whistling in an old cellar. She didn't say a price, just stared at me and nodded slightly. I asked the doll's name, and she answered simply, "Emily." I was about to bargain, but the old woman raised her hand to stop me and whispered, "Don't leave it in the bedroom, especially at night." That sentence sent a chill down my spine, but I just smiled. There was no such thing as superstition in modern times. When I got home, I wiped the dust off the doll and placed it on the bookshelf in the living room next to the other antiques. That night, I turned on some classical jazz, read a book as usual, and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., I woke up. In the darkness, I saw something at the end of the bed. I turned on the nightlight. Emily was sitting there, the doll. Her blue porcelain eyes looked straight at me, her head tilted slightly, her hands placed neatly on her skirt. I was startled, but tried to calm down. Maybe I picked it up and forgot to put it back, or someone was naughty. But I was alone in this house. I put it back on the shelf, then carefully locked the living room door. The next night, I woke up again to what sounded like very light footsteps. When I opened my eyes, Emily was there again, this time sitting closer, only a few inches away. My heart was pounding, goosebumps all over my body. I no longer thought it was a coincidence. I decided to put it in a locked wooden box, then put it in the storage room. But the next morning, the box was wide open, the lock broken as if something had broken it very hard. The doll was back at my bedside, as if it had never been there. I started to panic. I looked it up online. There were thousands of stories of haunted dolls all over the world. Each story had something in common: fixed eyes, sudden appearances, strange dreams, and death. The more I read, the more chills I felt. I couldn't sleep anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt someone staring at me from the foot of my bed. One night, I tried to stay awake all night. At 2:58, I heard a sound like fingernails lightly scratching the door. Then a giggle like a child's voice rang out. I rushed to turn on the lights all over the house, but saw nothing. Emily was still there, sitting silently under the doll's feet. There was an old piece of paper folded into 3, on which was written in a slanted, scribbled handwriting, "Don't leave her alone at night." My story began from there, and I gradually understood that what I brought back from the flea market was not just an antique. It was a spirit, imprisoned and trying to find a way back. Everything was just beginning. The most terrifying things were still ahead. Please watch episode 2, The Locker and the First Nightmare. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, after the first night of waking up with the doll at my bedside, I couldn't fall asleep again. The next day, I was exhausted and anxious. I tried to convince myself that I had either sleepwalked or had accidentally moved the doll without remembering. But deep inside, a lingering fear was growing. Emily's porcelain eyes seemed to still be imprinted in my memory, as if they knew what I was thinking. I decided to do things more carefully. I found a sturdy wooden box with an iron lock and a small padlock. I wrapped the doll in several layers of cloth, placed it in the box, locked it, and took it down to the basement. Before closing the basement door, I lit a candle and said a few words to calm my mind. I didn't believe in spirituality, but at that time, I had no other way to feel safe. That night, I tried to go to bed early. I left the nightlight on, put on headphones, and played some soft music to lull me to sleep. Around 3 in the morning, however, I was awakened by a slight noise, a scuffling sound, as if something was being dragged across the wooden floor. My heart was pounding. I opened my eyes and turned my head toward the foot of the bed. A chill ran down my spine. Emily was there again, sitting upright, her head tilted to the left, her eyes staring straight at me. What scared me more was that her hands were covered in dust and dirt, as if she had crawled out of some dark place. I jumped out of bed, turned on all the lights in the house. I ran down to the basement. The box was still there, wide open. The lock was broken, lying on the floor beside me. I gasped, not believing my eyes. There was no sign of forced entry. All the doors were locked from the inside. So how had Emily gotten out of the box, climbed the stairs, and returned to my bed? I began to look for more obvious signs. I set up a camera in the bedroom, pointing at the foot of the bed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room and watched the live feed from the camera on my phone. At 2:43, the screen blurred for a few seconds, and then I saw that Emily was no longer in the same place. I rushed up to the room. She was there, exactly as before. I checked the video recording, but there was only static, and then the doll had changed position. There was no image showing movement, no sound, no mechanical movement. It was like ... teleportation. From that day on, I started having recurring dreams. In the dream, I was standing in the middle of a white room. In front of me was a little girl with long hair covering her face, wearing a white dress, standing with her back turned. The girl did nothing, just stood still. When I approached, she slowly turned her head, and instead of a face, there was only a layer of torn skin, blood dripping onto the white tile floor. I screamed and woke up in a cold sweat. I told my best friend Thomas, who was not superstitious, but after listening, he advised me to find a psychic. Thomas gave me the address of a psychic named Eliza. She lived about an hour's drive from the city, and specialized in helping people with paranormal phenomena. At first I was hesitant, but after a few sleepless nights, I decided to give it a try. When I brought the doll to Eliza, she didn't seem surprised. She just looked at it for a moment and then nodded slightly. She said that there was a spirit residing in the doll, not a demon, but a trapped entity with heavy resentment that was trying to attach itself to a human. She said that if I didn't quickly cut the connection, the spirit would gradually invade my sleep, and then my body. I shuddered. I asked her if there was any way to stop it. Eliza just said, "Don't leave it alone. Don't leave it near a mirror. And never leave it at the end of the bed again." That night, I put the doll in the storage room, where there was no mirror and every crack was sealed. But I didn't know that the worst was still waiting for me ahead. I woke up in the middle of the night. In my head was a small whisper, like a lullaby in a child's voice. The sound rang out steadily, penetrating every corner of the room. I didn't turn on the light, didn't dare to move. In the darkness, I felt someone standing at the head of the bed, staring at me. And then, a childish voice spoke, right next to my ear, as light as the wind. Daniel, don't leave me, I jumped up, my heart pounding like a drum. There was no one in the room, but the storage room door was open, and under my bed there was a trail of dust, as if something had quietly crawled out of the room and waited for a chance to appear. Please follow episode 3, The Neighbor and the Bloody History. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, after the night. I heard the whispering voice in my ear. I no longer dared to sleep alone. All the lights in the house were on all night, but fear still crept into every dark corner of my mind. Even though I had carefully hidden the doll in a locked cabinet, taped it, and placed heavy rocks on top, the feeling of being watched did not disappear. I gradually fell into a state of panic, lack of sleep, and prolonged stress. One morning, while watering the plants in the backyard, I happened to meet an elderly neighbor named Agnes. She had lived in the house across the street for nearly 40 years. Seeing me looking exhausted, she asked me a few questions. At first, I just laughed it off, but then, as if I could not bear it any longer, I briefly recounted the story of the old doll that kept appearing, even though I had carefully hidden it. After hearing this, Agnes's expression changed completely. Her eyes darkened and her hands trembled as she gripped the handle of her cane. She told me to come into her house for tea. Agnes's house was filled with old black and white photo frames. The smell of rotten wood and herbs mixed together into a strange fragrance. She poured tea, then told me a story that sent a chill down my spine. 30 years ago, the house I was living in belonged to a family of 3, a mother, father, and a little girl named Emily. According to Agnes, Emily was a very good, gentle, but seemingly sad child, always holding a doll that looked exactly like the one I owned. She almost never left the doll, even when she slept. Neighbors had seen her standing silently at the second-floor window, holding the doll and looking out at the street for hours. One winter night, the whole neighborhood was awakened by a terrifying scream coming from that house. When the neighbors ran over, the door was locked from the inside. The police broke down the door and found Emily's parents dead in bed with deep cuts to their throats, and the little girl had disappeared without a trace. The bedroom was left with only a bloodstain, and the doll lying silently on the floor. The case was later closed for lack of evidence, and Emily's body was never found. The house was abandoned for nearly 10 years before it was put up for sale. My heart sank. The name Emily, the doll, and the dream of the girl who wasn't in the white room, all of it seemed to fit together. I asked Agnes if she had any pictures of the family. She nodded and rummaged through a drawer and handed me an old, yellowed photograph. It showed a little girl about 8 years old holding a doll with a crack on its face, the exact same doll I was holding. Behind her was a woman I recognized immediately, doll Cellar at a flea market. I was pulled into a whirlpool of truth. If the old woman was Emily's mother, Why would she sell the doll? Or was she also trying to shake off some cursed memory? I called the phone number printed on the business card I had gotten when I bought the doll, but it was a number. I didn't go home that night. One rented a room near the city center and stayed there for the night. But the nightmares followed me. In my dream, I saw Emily standing in front of the room, knocking on the door repeatedly. When I opened the door, she raised her head. Her black eyes were empty and a trail of blood ran down her forehead and neck. She held the doll out to me and whispered, "My parents can't sleep. They miss me." I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I called a taxi home that night. As soon as I entered, I smelled a familiar scent, the scent of tea in Anis's house. I went upstairs. On the bed, the doll was back. Her porcelain eyes were shining in the darkness. I knew I couldn't run away anymore. Every time I leave, it comes back. It's like I've accidentally opened a portal between two worlds, and Emily is still waiting for someone to take her home. Please watch episode 4, Night Camera and the Second Shadow. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk after learning about the bloody past of the house and Emily's true identity, I no longer dared to take the presence of the haunted doll lightly. I no longer called it an antique or a collectible, but began to see it as a living entity. From the moment it returned to my bed, I knew it didn't want to leave me, and I couldn't leave it either. I decided to set up a night vision camera system. I mounted a small camera in the corner of the bedroom ceiling, another in the hallway, and the last one in front of the storage room door where I was hiding the doll. I wanted to verify whether what was happening was an illusion or if something was actually moving around my house every night. The cameras were all directly connected to my phone, so I could watch it at any time. The first night after the installation, I lay still and stayed awake. Every few minutes I checked the screen. Everything was fine. But at about 2:17 a.m., the camera in the closet started to pick up a signal. The screen flickered with unusual streaks of light. For a few seconds, the image was blurry. The doll was no longer in its original place. Instead, I saw a small, thin figure standing in front of the camera, her face completely obscured by darkness. Then the image disappeared. I rushed out of bed and ran straight to the closet. The door was still locked. I opened it. It was empty. The doll was gone. My heart was pounding. Sweat was pouring down my body. I went back to the bedroom. The light was still on, and then I froze. Emily was sitting on my bed, her back to the door, her long hair covering the back of her neck. I stood there for a few seconds, unable to move. Then, gathering all my courage, I approached. When I touched her shoulder, the doll immediately tilted its head to the side, its eyes wide open, looking at me as if it had been waiting for me. I screamed, threw it to the ground, and ran out of the room. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. Strangely, all the videos were gone. There was nothing on the hard drive or the app. I called Thomas to tell him. He came over and helped me check the camera system. But despite turning everything upside down, we couldn't find any footage that night. Thomas decided to stay overnight to check. He's quite practical and doesn't believe in psychics. We arranged 2 portable cameras, one under the bed and one fixed opposite the sleeping area. That night, I slept on the sofa, while Thomas stayed in the room. Before going to sleep, he smiled and said that if anything happened, at least there would be clear evidence. Around 3 a.m., I was woken up by a loud scream. I rushed upstairs and found Thomas sitting on the floor, his face pale, his eyes wide open and unblinking. In his hand was his phone, the screen showing live video from the camera. On the video, a blurry image appeared, a childish figure sitting at the end of the bed, holding a haunted doll. It slowly turned its head towards the camera. Even though the image was unclear, I recognized it as Emily. Thomas was speechless. I helped him out of the room, and he immediately asked to leave the house that night. Before leaving, he turned back to me and said, "That thing is not just watching you, it is living with you." After that night, I had no more visitors. I lived in isolation, haunted by the sound of small footsteps every night, the shadows passing by the window, and the feeling that someone was standing behind me when I looked in the mirror. I tried to find a way to break the curse. I took the doll to the nearest church, but as soon as I set foot on the premises, a strong wind blew through, knocking down the statue of the saint that was placed in front of the gate. The priest just looked at me, then shook his head and refused to give a reason. I understood that even the sacred places did not want Emily's presence. I started reading books about exorcisms. In an old book I found online, there was a handwritten note that the soul trapped in a doll often appeared in parallel with a second shadow, an independent but bound entity. If that shadow appeared in reality, then the soul was strong enough to escape the host. I remembered the blurry video at night, the shadow standing next to the camera. I realized Emily was no longer confined to the doll. She was gradually materializing, and I was the only one who saw it. As I was writing these lines, the light in the room just flickered for the third time. Outside in the hallway, I heard the sound of small bare feet approaching. Even though the door was locked, I knew that she would still get in. I had no way to hide anymore. I needed to find out the origin of the doll. Needed to know what happened that fateful night 30 years ago. Maybe the past will have the answer to end this nightmare. Please watch episode 5, Blood on the Bedsheet. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. I woke up in a haze between worlds, the dim morning light filtering through the curtains, soothing my pounding headache. But it wasn't the pain that made me freeze. It was the blood. A long dark streak, stretching from the foot of the bed to the head of the bed. On the white sheets, it looked like a bloody brush scribble. My heart almost stopped in that moment. I looked down at my hand. No wound. I ran into the bathroom, checked my entire body. Still intact, not a scratch. So where did the blood come from? I opened every room, checked the floor, under the bed, in the closet. There was no sign of anyone else breaking in. It was just me and the haunted doll. Emily lay on the chair by the window, her porcelain eyes staring straight out. Her hand was stained with dried blood, her fingernails covered in dirt as if she had scratched something. I grabbed her, not so gently this time. I wrapped it in a cloth, tied it tightly, locked it in a metal box, and put it in the basement. I vowed never to let it out again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, holding a cold cup of tea, trying to understand what was going on. I turned on my computer and searched for keywords related to the phenomenon of blood appearing for no reason. Haunted dolls, supernatural phenomena. Most of the results led to small forums where people who had experienced similar things shared their experiences. One article caught my attention. The author, who used to live in Japan, told of an ancient cursed doll named Okiku. It had the ability to grow hair and cause blood to appear near where it was placed. The author wrote that the blood was not created by the doll, but rather a connection between it and the spirit of a dead child. The blood was a sign that the spirit was trying to enter the physical world. I felt a chill down my spine. Emily wasn't just haunting me, she was slowly moving towards me. And the most terrifying thing was that I was no longer afraid. I was getting used to her presence. It was as if I was becoming a part of her world. The next morning, I decided to wash the sheets. But when I peeled them off, underneath the mattress was a line of words written in dried blood. The letters were crooked and distorted, but still legible. It said, "Daniel playing with his brother." I shivered and threw the mattress out of the room. I called Thomas back. He came that afternoon with an infrared camera and an energy field meter. We set everything up, ready to record if anything unusual happened that night. Thomas also brought a cleansing candle and read a short prayer. But I knew that these things wouldn't work on Emily anymore. She had gone too far beyond the boundaries of a normal spirit. That night, Thomas slept on the sofa, and I lay in the bedroom, the camera still recording. I closed my eyes but could not sleep. In the darkness, I heard a creaking sound like someone was crawling on the floor. Then a whisper sounded right next to my ear. Not in Vietnamese, but in a choked voice, whispering broken English. "Come play with me." I opened my eyes. There was no one. But the light from the camera was flashing. I looked up at the ceiling. A small figure was crawling upside down on the ceiling, head turned down, eyes glowing in the darkness. I screamed, but no one answered. The next morning, Thomas showed me the video. The camera clearly recorded me lying still on the bed, and behind me, a white figure stood still by the head of the bed for more than 20 minutes. Every time I moved, the figure moved slightly. No one entered the room. No door opened. But the figure was still present in the small room. We were silent. Thomas, for the first time in his life, had to admit that this was no longer a joke or an explainable phenomenon. He told me something that I would never forget. There are souls who don't want to be saved. They just want to be remembered. I don't know how much longer I can endure this, but I also know that I can't throw Emily away anymore. It's like there's an invisible string between me and her. As long as I breathe, she will exist. And I have a feeling that tonight something even more terrible will happen. Please follow episode 6, Whisper in the Wind. Hello, everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk since the night. I discovered the words written in blood on the mattress. I have not been myself. Every time I walk through the hallway, I feel a cold wind blowing across my neck. It is not the wind from the window or the air conditioner, but an invisible breath, cold and short, like the breath behind my neck. I removed all the mirrors in the house, covering them with black cloth. I no longer dare to look at my reflection, because sometimes I feel that it does not reflect what I am doing. One rainy night, when the wind whistled through the cracks of the window, I began to hear small sounds in the air. It was not the sound of rain or the sound of branches hitting the wall. It was a whisper. At first, it was just the sound of the wind swirling around like a soft lullaby. But as the night went on, I heard it more clearly. A young voice, endless, echoing regularly. "Daniel, don't leave me." I thought I was being paranoid. I turned on the recording on my phone, left it by my bed all night. The next morning, I played the recording. In the faint sound of the wind, I could clearly hear the giggles of children and a phrase repeated in English. "Stay here, play with me, stay here." I brought the recording to Thomas. After listening to it, he was silent for a long time. Then he suggested that I should look into Emily's family more closely. He helped me look up old records through an acquaintance who worked at the city archives. 3 days later, we received a copy of Emily's psychological report from the last years before she disappeared. What made me shiver was that the report stated that Emily often talked to an imaginary friend. She called it the other girl. She said that her friend lived in the wind, in the walls, and could hide in dolls whenever adults appeared. The story began to go beyond the initial speculation. It was not just Emily's spirit that haunted the house. There was another entity that existed in parallel. Something that had no human form, but knew how to manipulate dreams, emotions, and even memories. I decided to try something else. I placed the tape recorder in the rooms, especially in the hallways where I often felt the strange wind. I left it there for 3 nights. On the 3rd night, when I played the recording back, I heard what sounded like someone singing a lullaby. The voice was thin, like the wind blowing through the fields. But when I turned up the volume, I realized the lyrics were a prayer in an ancient language. And then a laugh rang out that made me shiver. Not a child's, but to children's laughter, overlapping, chaotic, crazy. That night, I dreamed. I found myself trapped in a closed room with no windows. In the corner of the room was the doll, Emily, sitting across from me. But next to her was a shadow twice her height, shapeless. When I walked towards her, she raised her hand and pointed at me. A voice echoed in my head. The one who opened the door. The one who had to stay. I woke up with a dry mouth and a pounding heart. I couldn't tell what was real and what was a dream. The whispers in the wind still echoed like echoes from another dimension. I called Agnes, my old neighbor, to ask her if she had heard anything strange. After a moment of silence, she said yes. She had heard her name being called from behind the wall, but she didn't answer, because she knew that if she did, they would step out of the wind. Her words haunted me all day. I started wearing headphones when I slept, turning on white noise to drown out the wind. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. Emily and the other girl knew I could hear them. And now they wanted me to answer. I decided to try something crazy. I took the doll out of the box, placed it in the middle of the living room, and turned on the recorder, letting the phone record every sound for 8 hours. I locked all the doors, left the house, and stayed at Thomas's. The next morning, I returned and played the recording. For the first 3 hours, there was only silence. But on the 4th hour, a voice spoke. "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel," over and over for 3 minutes. Then laughter, and finally, a deeper, more intense voice. Daniel opened the door. "Let us in." I had never cried like that in my life. I felt helpless, scared, and hopeless all at once. I knew they were getting closer, very close, and they didn't just want to play anymore, they wanted to stay. Watch episode 7, The Ritual of Betrayal. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, I sat in the middle of the living room, the afternoon light filtering through the thick curtains, creating long streaks like iron bars. The haunted doll was still there, its empty eyes staring at me as if waiting for something. After the last night of recording, the call to let us in, I knew that time was running out. If I didn't act, sooner or later this house would no longer be a place for humans. I contacted an occult researcher named Mr. Harris. He was an old British man living in seclusion in the southern woods, who had written many articles on exorcism and ancient spell-breaking rituals. When I called and briefly told him about Emily, about the whispers, about the blood and the dream, he was silent for a long time and then answered with a sentence that made me shiver. There are souls that cannot wait to be released. They want the living to replace them. Harris agreed to help me perform a ritual called betrayal. According to him, the purpose of this ritual is not to destroy the spirit, but to force it back into the host, in this case, the doll. But to do that, I had to directly confront the entity in the dream, invite it into the body, and then force it back. This was the most dangerous way because if I failed, the spirit would take over completely. We chose a new moon night to perform the ritual. Harris came to my house at dusk, carrying an old wooden box containing black salt, a mirror covered in red cloth, a black candle, and a small silver knife. He asked me to prepare a room with no windows, as little light as possible. We chose the storage room. I sat in the middle of the room, the doll in front of me, surrounded by a circle of black salt and 5 candles. Harris began to recite the summoning in the ancient language. The room became cold even in the middle of summer. Suddenly, the central candle flickered and went out. In that split second, I heard the soft sound of footsteps behind me. When I turned around, there was no one, but the doll had changed its position. Its hands were raised as if in supplication. Harris motioned for me to close my eyes. He began to recite the words over and over again, almost hypnotically. I slowly fell into a state of confusion between consciousness and sleep. In my head, a voice rang out, no longer soft, but fierce, full of anger. Daniel, you cannot leave us. We need you. I found myself standing in a pitch-black space, surrounded by small hands trying to grab me. Emily appeared, but this time, her eyes were completely black. Her hair was long and fell to the ground. Next to her was a faint entity, only a shape but no face. It glowed softly and made a howling sound like a storm. I screamed in my head, "Come back, come back." Emily's soul screamed angrily. Darkness came crashing down like a tsunami. I felt like I was being torn apart, but then Harris's voice rang out clearly from the real world. "Go back, get out of her body." I opened my eyes. The room shook. A cold wind blew through, even though there were no windows. The candles flared and went out at the same time. The doll fell, her eyes closed. I gasped, my whole body drenched in sweat. Harris sat beside me, his face pale, his hands shaking. He said only one sentence, "You saved your body." We wrapped the doll in black cloth, put it back in the box, and buried it deep underground behind the house. Harris told me never to dig it up again, never to mention her name at night, and especially not to let the wind into the room when I slept. I cleaned the house for 3 days. I threw away all the old toys, took down all the old pictures, and took out everything that had traces of Emily. The house gradually became quiet. No more footsteps, no more whispers. I slept straight through the night after many long nights of panic, but then, exactly 1 week later, I received a package from an unknown sender. Inside was a black and white photo of a room that looked exactly like mine. On the bed, A little girl was sitting, hugging a doll, her eyes looking straight at the camera. Below the photo was a handwritten line in red ink. "Thank you for playing with me." I couldn't open my mouth to scream anymore. All I could do was hold the photo tightly, listening to the wind starting to blow through the crack in the bedroom door. Please watch Episode 8, Laughter Behind the Door. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, I kept the black and white photo that had arrived in a drawer, locked away, but not a day went by without thinking about it. After the betrayal ritual with Mr. Harris, I thought everything was over. I thought I had banished Emily's spirit back into the haunted doll and buried it deep underground. But that photo, with its blood-red handwriting, was a reminder that what I was facing could not be buried so easily. That night, my house became strangely silent. There was no wind, no familiar creaking. Everything was so quiet that it was unnatural. I sat on the sofa, staring at the half-closed bedroom door. Suddenly, a sound came from behind it. A soft giggle, like a child playing hide-and-seek, echoed in the dark space. I stood up, my hand shaking as I grasped the doorknob. But I did not open it. I knew that if that door opened, I would no longer be me. I took a few steps back, my heart pounding. The laughter continued, as if someone was enjoying themselves on the other side of the door. I called Thomas. He still had a copy of the ritual video, still haunted by what he had seen. When I told him about the laughter, Thomas said that maybe the ritual hadn't been completely successful. Maybe some part of the spirit was still lingering in the house. He told me to check where I had buried the doll. I didn't want to. I really didn't want to dig. But that night, unable to bear the laughter any longer, I grabbed a flashlight and a shovel and went to the back of the house, where I had buried Emily's box. I dug through the dirt, layer by layer, each heavy stroke of the shovel. When the shovel made a metallic sound, I stopped. The box was still there. But when I opened it, it was empty. There was no doll, just a torn black cloth. I screamed, "Who did this? How could it have opened the lid and crawled out?" I ran home and locked the door. But when I entered the living room, all the lights went out. In the darkness, a small voice rang out from the wall. "You're still here, Daniel." I turned on the flashlight and scanned the room. No one was there, but the bedroom door was wide open. There was a trail of fresh blood on the doorknob, as if someone had just grabbed it so hard that it bled. I backed away, hitting the table, dropping the flashlight on the floor. For a split second, as the light of the flashlight bounced back up to the ceiling, I saw a pair of small legs swinging close to the ceiling, but there was no one standing below. I crouched down, covering my ears, screaming in despair. The laughter seemed to echo through the walls, soft, insistent, haunting. It was no longer the sound of a child. It had become a distorted sound, like hundreds of children laughing together, mixed into a symphony of madness. I ran out of the house, to Annis's house. When I told her everything, she was silent for a long time, then took out a small wooden box. Inside was a necklace with a cross and an old piece of paper. On the paper was a diagram of an underground room. She said that the house I lived in used to have a sub-basement, built by Emily's father to contain what he called a second soul. According to her, one time when Emily was playing in the woods, she picked up a strange object, maybe an old doll or a ceiling object. From then on, she changed. spoke strangely, and cut her own hair. Emily's parents built the sub-basement room to perform a sealing ceremony, locking that object away. But after her parents died, no one knew that the sub-basement still existed. I looked at the diagram and noticed an unusual detail. Behind the wall of my basement, there was a small space. I had never checked it because I thought it was a load-bearing wall. I immediately went back and broke the wall. After nearly an hour of chiseling, I saw a gap. A strong, musty smell rose. The room was dark and small, with a stone altar inside, and in the middle, a rotten wooden box. I lit the flashlight and approached. The box had strange characters engraved on it, like a spell. Before I could do anything, the laughter rang out again, this time right behind me. I turned around. In a split second, I saw Emily standing at the entrance of the cellar, her face no longer the face of the girl in the photo. Her skin was wrinkled, her eyes were black and empty, her mouth was grinning from ear to ear. I stood there, stunned. The girl slowly reached out to me, but instead of rushing forward, she stepped back into the darkness and disappeared. When I turned back to the wooden box, it had been opened, empty inside. I didn't know what I had unwittingly unleashed, but I was sure that Emily was only the surface of something deeper, darker, and much older. And the laughter behind the door is no longer just that of a lonely soul. Please watch episode 9, The Sealed Cellar. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, after the night. I discovered the secret basement and saw Emily appear and disappear. I began to realize that it was not over, it was just beginning. The laughter, the shadows, and the haunted doll were just the doorway to a deeper, darker place, a place where reason could not reach. I went back down to the basement the next morning, this time with a headlamp, a mask, and a video camera. The air in the basement was thick with the smell of mold and rust. The stone walls were mottled with dark green mold. In the middle of the room, the stone altar was still intact, but this time I noticed the carved characters around the table legs. They were not Latin characters. I took a picture and sent it to Mr. Harris. A few hours later, he called back, his voice full of concern. It was an ancient script used in a soul-sealing ritual, a form of permanent confinement, not allowing the soul to pass on or return to the mortal world. He claimed that if the sealed wooden box in the vault was opened, the thing inside would no longer be bound. This did not concern Emily alone. It was possible that her family had accidentally awakened or nurtured an ancient spirit, residing in the object. I asked him if there was a way to seal it again. Harris was silent and then said, yes, but it would require a medium, a remnant of the spirit, such as hair, fingernails, or blood. I remembered that one time before burying the doll, I had wrapped it in an old handkerchief. I quickly ran into the storage room to find it. The handkerchief was still there, with a few strands of reddish-brown hair and a dark brown stain of dried blood. That evening, Harris and I returned to the vault to perform the second sealing ritual. He spread black salt around the stone table, placed the handkerchief in the center, and began to recarve the symbols on the wall. As I prepared, I suddenly saw something strange. A small crack in the wall had collapsed, revealing an old tin box. I took it out and opened the lid. Inside was a small, moldy diary, the cover handwritten by Emily's mother. The first few pages were almost illegible, but the middle few were legible. She recorded the terrible things that had happened in the house, Emily began to change after picking up the doll from a dump near the woods. She stopped smiling and talking, and just sat there whispering to an invisible friend named Clara. The night before the accident, Emily's mother wrote that she had stood in front of a mirror for 3 hours, repeating the same phrase over and over again. Clara said, "We can trade." Clara said she will protect me. I handed the diary to Harris. He just shook his head and said, "Clara is not a child. That was the fake name of an ancient spirit that possessed objects to lure children into trading souls. Once the child agrees, Clara will take over the body, while the real soul is trapped in a host such as a doll, a mirror, or even air." In Emily's case, she was switched. Her father discovered it too late and tried to lock Clara in this cellar. Hearing this, I felt cold all over. What I had seen, what I had heard, was not Emily. It was Clara, wearing Emily's soul like a coat, while her real self had been trapped for years in the haunted doll. Harris began the ritual. He burned the hair and blood on a handkerchief, reciting ancient words as if whispering into the darkness. The room became cold. The air seemed to freeze. Suddenly, the flame on the table flared up and turned green. At the same time, all the flashlights went out. In the darkness, I heard a giggle spreading, this time not just in my ears, but as if echoing from within my chest. I felt my legs being pulled. I fell, struggling. An icy hand grabbed my ankle. I screamed for Harris. He told me not to leave the salt circle. I tried to crawl back. The other hand let go, but then I saw, in the corner of the room, Clara appeared. Not a little girl, a pitch-black figure, eyes like 2 deep holes, mouth stretched from ear to ear. The smile not of a child, but of a demon wearing human skin. Harris shouted one last sentence, then threw the burning object into the center of the circle. The fire flared up, tearing the darkness apart. Clara screamed, the sound like shattering glass and metal. The room shook, the wall behind her cracked into pieces. Then all was silent. The fire went out. No more laughter, no more darkness. Clara was sealed back, but I knew a part of her was still somewhere in this house, and Emily still wasn't truly saved. Please watch episode 10, New Scars on the Body. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. I woke up the next morning thinking that after the ritual of sealing Clara in the cellar, everything would finally be over. But my body felt heavy, as if pressed by an invisible force. When I entered the bathroom and opened my shirt, I was stunned. There was a new scar on my back, long, thin, like a scratch, running from my shoulder blade down to near my waist. The wound was not bleeding, but it was red, sore, and there was no sign of anything that could have caused it. I tried to remember last night. Maybe while struggling, I was kicked or bumped into something in the cellar. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the hand that was pulling my leg at that time did not touch my back. So where did the scar come from? I called Harris. After a few seconds of silence, he said something that sent a chill down my spine. The seal only trapped the spirit, not the connection. If that scar appeared, it meant that Clara was still present in the physical space, at least in part. I felt my heart collapse. I thought it was over, but no, Clara was still there. Maybe hiding somewhere in the walls, in my dreams, in my own body. From that day on, every night, the scar on my back ached. as if someone was gently scratching it from the inside. I started to have strange dreams. In my dream, I was wandering around a strange house. Old wooden walls, wet tile floors. I heard children laughing, small hands tapping on the door, and dolls dragging on the floor. When I reached the end of the hallway, a door opened. There, Emily was sitting with her back turned, her face reflected in the mirror. But it wasn't Emily in the mirror, it was me. I woke up in a cold sweat, and my hands were shaking like someone else's. One night, while looking in the bathroom mirror, I found myself smiling, not my usual smile. It was a crooked smile, long and cruel. I stepped back, my heart pounding. I touched my face, but the reflection in the mirror was still smiling, though. My lips were stiff. I called Thomas. When he arrived, I told him everything. Thomas saw the scar, checked the house, but found nothing unusual, until we checked the video from the night before. The camera in the living room, at 3 a.m., recorded me walking out of the bedroom, walking to the middle of the room, and standing there for more than 10 minutes. Not moving, not saying anything, just standing there, eyes staring straight into the camera, not blinking. Thomas turned to look at me, his face pale. He said he was in the bedroom next to me, and I definitely didn't leave the room. So who was the person in the video? Me, or something that was taking on my form? Clara didn't just exist in the house. She was slowly invading my whole body, bit by bit. That night, I locked all the windows, took away all the mirrors in the house, and covered every crack with thick paper. I tried to sleep, but the dream came again. In it, I was lying on a stone table in the basement. Clara stood above her, smiling, holding a silver knife like in a ritual. Behind her were hundreds of small, faceless figures, giggling. She leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Daniel, you are the door. I am the one who passes through." I woke up to see blood seeping from the scar on my back, and right above the bed, there was a small, bloody handprint on the white pillow. No one else had ever entered the room. I knew. I started keeping a diary, day by day, hour by hour, recording my feelings, my dreams, and even changes in my behavior. I no longer remembered what I did at night. Some days I woke up to find the kitchen light on. Other days I found the sink full of water, as if someone had just washed something very dirty. I was losing control. I saw images that no one else saw. I heard voices calling from the second floor, even though the second floor had been locked for a long time. And most of all, I began to fear myself. Fear that one day, when I looked in the mirror, the person looking back would no longer be me. I had to find a way to end it. I had to go deeper into Clara's origins, starting from where Emily found the first doll, the forest near the landfill south of the city, where it all began. Please follow episode 11, The Purifying Fire and the Last Scream. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, I returned to the woods south of the city, where Emily's mother had written in her diary that her daughter had found the first doll. The woods were now abandoned, the grass was knee-high, and there was no trace of any path. I went deeper, carrying a backpack with water, a flashlight, a lighter, and Emily's bloody handkerchief. It was the only thing that held the last shred of connection to the real girl. In the middle of the woods, I found a hollowed-out area. There were pieces of rotten wood, rust, rags, and old toys. There was something in the air that sent a chill down my spine. even though the sun was still high in the sky. I grabbed my lighter, ready to light it all up and burn it all. But before I could do anything, a sound rang out behind me. It was the sound of a doll hitting wood. I turned. Emily was there. No, not her. It was Clara. But this time, she no longer looked like a child. She was taller, thinner, long hair covering half her face. She held the doll in her hand, her black eyes empty like a bottomless pit. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I took the bloody handkerchief and placed it among the old things, then sprinkled black salt around it. Clara roared, a sound that couldn't be human. She walked towards me step by step. The wind was fierce despite the hot noon sun. I lit a fire. Lit the pile of objects. The fire flared up abnormally high. Pale blue light covered the entire forest. Clara screamed. The whole forest shook. I thought my ears were going to be torn apart, but I stood firm. I screamed with all my might. Give Emily back. The fire burned stronger, burning everything, and for a moment I saw Clara burn. Not her body, but her soul. She dissolved like smoke, her eyes sparkling with the last light before going out. And then the wind stopped. The fire died. Alone in the ashes was one thing. A small silver necklace, shaped like a star, that I had seen in an old photo of Emily. I picked it up. In that moment, I heard a very soft voice. Thank you, Daniel. I returned home after a long day. That night, I slept without nightmares. No more laughter, no more shadow in the mirror, no more bleeding scar. Everything was strangely quiet. The next morning, I opened the drawer and took out the black and white photo that had been sent. But in the photo, there was no girl or doll, just an empty room, a made bed, a soft light shining through the window, and the red writing was gone. I burned the photo, along with the recordings, videos, diaries, and everything related to Clara. I moved away, left the city, and lived in a small town where no one knew who I was. Every morning, I wore Emily's necklace around my neck, as a reminder that there are souls that still need to be saved, and there are hauntings that cannot be completely erased. Only learning to live with that memory. I no longer see the shadow of the person behind the door. I no longer hear the wind calling my name in the night. But sometimes, on rainy nights, I still hear a child's voice, soft on the porch. Its laughter, as light as the wind, like a goodbye, or a promise that everything is not really over.